Welcome back to day 14 of 31 monsters in 31 days. Let's find out who we are going to make today. We are making, an evil fairy. All right, let's get started.
While we're sketching out the plan and making the basic blob shape that all the monsters in this series are built off of, I'm going to give you a bit of a history of fairies and why I include them in my monster list. If you want to see slower, step-by-step instructions on how to make this basic blob form, check out this video. For details on how I do my paper mache, check out this video. Both are linked in the description. Fairies, or fae folk, are found in the folklore of many European cultures. Thus, myths and stories about fairies don't have a single origin. The label of fairy might refer to a number of different magical creatures who are capable of magic, mischief, and trickery. Common across cultures is the belief that people need to ward off fairy magic with protective charms, such as iron horseshoes, four-leaf clovers, bells, or food offering. This protection was needed because the fairies were capable of some evil stuff. The Banshee from the Isle of Man was a vampire fairy who seduced young men only to violently slaughter them and drink their blood. The Welsh Bendithumumai fairy would kidnap human babies and swap them with their own deformed offspring. In Scottish stories, the Slaw was a race of fairies who would hunt nightly for souls to snatch or victims to drop from great heights. I'm just scratching the surface of fairy folklore here, but it's definitely a lot darker than Disney's Tinkerbell would leave you to believe. I had to include fairies on my monster list because they are definitely a group of beings that you don't want to mess with. My next step is to make the fairy's eyeballs. I'll need those to dry before I can add them to her face. I'm sculpting these bits with DOS air dry clay. This clay has a lot of fiber and I really recommend it for a project like this. I'll leave a link for this clay and my other supplies in the video description. Here are the eyes all dry. I'm giving them a light sand with these nail files I like. This makes the eyeballs super smooth. Just don't forget to protect your lungs whenever you're sanding dry clay. I'm going to paint these eyes now. I kind of want these to have a similar look to the eyes in my Goblin project, but with a darker color scheme. So I'm painting these out black. And then while the paint is still a bit tacky, I'm brushing some mica powder around the edges. If you don't have mica powder, sparkly eyeshadow works just as well. Check out your dollar store for some cheap options. I'm using some UV resin to both give them a nice glossy top coat and protect them from the additional paper mache I'm about to do next. I think this technique makes for some very spooky, haunted looking eyes. I hot glued those onto the dry blob. I'm using a small wad of paper to make her little bun. I'm just making a paper ball, taping it up, and hot gluing it onto the back of her head. I'm covering that with a couple layers of paper mache too. Now I'm using some brown paper coated in glue to make her lower eyelid. I'll fold that a couple times to thicken it up and give it a nice edge, and then I'll wrap that under her eyeball. I'm making her upper eyelids in a similar way to the lower eyelids, except I want these to be a bit thicker, so I'm twisting up a little bit of paper towel, folding it inside the paper like a little taco, and then placing that over her eye. I'm trying to tilt these at an angle so she looks a little bit angry. She is evil after all. I'm using a couple small wads of paper to give her some cheekbones. Those are both getting covered in brown paper too. I'm keeping her nose really simple. It's just some balled up gluey paper that I'm sticking to her face there and blending it in with some small bits of paper mache. I'm using another small wad of paper to build up her mouth area a bit, and I'm covering that in brown paper before making her lips. Her lips are made in a very similar way to the eyelids. The top lip is a bit of brown paper folded a few times to thicken it up. I used a small twist of paper towel inside the lower lip to make it a little poutier. And of course, I'm blending those in with some brown paper before setting my project aside to dry. While that's drying, I'm gonna make a pair of ears. I cut some pointy fairy ear shapes out of a cereal box, and now I'm cutting a small slit in to create a dart. I'm putting a bit of glue on there and then overlapping the legs of the dart to give the cardboard some shape. I'm using a small twist of paper towel to beef up the top edge of each ear, and then I'm covering them both in paper mache and setting them aside to dry. Now I've got to make some wings. I feel like it's a struggle every time I have to make wings, but this time I'm going to try sacrificing one of my plastic placemats that I work on to see if I can make wing making a little easier on myself. After drawing out my wing shape, I'm cutting them out with scissors, and I'm liking how these are looking, but they're a little flat. So outside, I'm using my heat gun to melt the plastic a little bit, bending the plastic into the shape I want, and then tossing it immediately into that bucket of cold water to cool the plastic down and essentially save my work. This lighting is terrible, but this worked pretty well. I had some black spray paint, so I'm using that to put a whiff of paint around the edges of each wing section. Here's how they look all dry. I was a little heavy with the paint on that one section, but all in all, these look pretty good. Now, the rest of my fairy is dry, so I'm hot gluing her ears to the sides of her head and covering that join with some small bits of paper mache. I'm gonna give some texture to her hair now. I'm using this pipe cleaner to make some flyaways coming out of her bun. I'm covering that in gluey paper and sticking it to her head. And then I'm twisting up more lengths of paper and gluing them to cover her bun area and her scalp. You can see I added a few more pipe cleaner flyaways to really sell the effect that her hair is out of sorts. Now I want to make her a collar, so I'm taking a long strip of paper that will fit around her neck, coating that in glue, and using some gluey paper towel to thicken it up a bit. I'll fold that in half, and then I'll cut a raggedy edge into the torn edge of the paper. When I've cut along the whole length, I'm wrapping it around the sculpture under the fairy's chin. We're going to set that aside to dry one more time before paint. Now she's dry, so I'm giving her hair an all-over base coat in this very dark gray. Her dress is also getting this same dark gray color. I'm giving her face an all-over base coat in this mid-bluish gray. When that's all dry, I'm giving her an all-over wash with this mid-gray color. This is just watered down acrylic paint I'm slapping on and wiping back with a damp paper towel. Finally, I'm using a sponge and some light blue paint to just go in and bring back some highlights on the higher areas of her face. When that paint is good and dry, I'm attaching her wings. Then I'm cleaning off her eyeballs with a cotton swab dipped in rubbing alcohol. And as a final finishing touch, I'm gluing some black felt onto the base. And here's our finished evil fairy. I really like how her hair turned out. I'm also pretty happy with the wings. I might try this method again in the future, maybe adapting a few things. Let me know if you think I did a good job in the comments. I try to reply to all of them. If you could hit the like button or even comment a random emoji, I'd so appreciate it. Since I'm a smaller channel, anytime you interact, it really helps me out because it tells YouTube this video is worth watching. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's video. You can watch ad-free and support my work on my Patreon. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you tomorrow.